Hello everyone. It is with great pleasure that we welcome you all to this webinar. I'm your host and speaker Sriram Prasad. Thank you for taking the time out to join us today as we talk about applying human factors and usability engineering to medical devices. The following is the agenda for today's presentation: Introduction to human factors and usability engineering, need of human factors and usability engineering, regulatory references, basic expectations, HFE process, the end result, services provided by Decos. Before we go into the topic, I would like to take a poll. The question is: are you aware of human factors engineering and its related ISO standards? I'm happy to see that many people are aware about the topic. Let's dive deeper and see about the studies involved. What is human factors engineering? Human factors engineering, otherwise known as HFE or usability engineering, is a well established discipline that concentrates on optimizing interactions between people and products. It is purely based on how people use technology, products, missions, and systems in their environments. HFE specialists apply knowledge and data about human characteristics and capabilities, cognitive and physical, such as data regarding the human body size, strength, and range of motion, facts about how people sense the world, example, how well we see, hear, feel, models of how people process information, make decisions, and react. As manufacturers consider developing new medical devices, one of the key questions that arises is: who will use the device and for what purpose? To understand the application of usability engineering to medical devices in detail, IEC 62366-1 is available. Now that you know the definition, let us first look at the need for human factors. Why human factors? It is the regulatory imperative. Firstly, the purpose of applying HFE is to make products that are safe, effective, and satisfying to use. Clearly, medical products should not place the people who use them at significant risk. Equally clear is the need for medical products to enable people to perform tasks correctly so that the product fulfill its intended purpose. Example, delivering treatment. Therefore, a medical product's safety and effectiveness are design mandates. Today, we are seeing a convergence of 100 plus years of HFE progress and a critical need to reduce medical error, specifically regarding interactions with medical products. Therefore, we speak of a regulatory imperative to apply HFE during the development of a medical product. It's an imperative, meaning it is mandated. Otherwise, a manufacturer might not receive a clearance or approval to market its device. There are some international consensus standards involving HFE and regulatory references to follow, which are IEC 62366-1 2015 plus Amendment 1 2020, Application of Usability Engineering to Medical Devices, IEC 60601-1-6 2020, Medical Electrical Equipment Part 1-6, 3rd edition, General Requirements for Basic Safety and Essential Performance, Collateral Standard Usability, ISO 14971 2019, Application of Risk Management to Medical Devices, AAMI HE 75 2009 or 2018, Human Factors Engineering Design of Medical Devices. There are government regulations in US, EU, UK, and other regions that require manufacturers to apply HFE process to the development of certain medical devices which are at high risk. Let's see the basic expectations for applying HFE. The basic expectations for applying HFE effectively during the development of medical product are as follows. Apply HFE early and throughout the design process. Mitigate use related risk primarily by inherently safe design. Conduct formative evaluations and iterate the design to further reduce risk. Validate user interface designs, generating evidence that risk mitigations work. Document HFE activities and outcomes. Before we go into the HFE process, I would like to take a poll. The question is, do you believe that the HFE process leads to more effective and user-friendly designs? Yes, human factors engineering process is a systematic approach to design that aims to optimize products, systems, or environments for human use. By considering the physical, cognitive, and social characteristics of users, the HFE process can help to create designs that are more effective, efficient, and satisfying for the people using them. HFE process. HFE plays an important role in our world, keeping users safe and healthy by applying a user centered design process to the development of products. Also, HFE gives three main benefits. Strategic advantage. This process helps to build strategic advantage by aligning a product more closely with clear user needs, protecting and increasing market share. Time and money. The HFE process reduces cost by giving project teams more information upon which to base decisions. This eliminates the tendency to go off on tangents and get products to market quicker. Regulatory compliance. The HFE process inherently ensures regulatory compliance and reduces the risk of rejection from EU notified bodies and or the FDA. The 6 steps for applying HFE process are research, analyze, design, evaluate, validate, submit. HFE process step 1, research. Research is part of the HFE process focused on learning about a product's users and the environments in which they will use the product. The research findings are used to determine and prioritize user needs. Why is it required? The FDA and other regulators expect manufacturers to design a product with the intended users and use environments in mind so that the final product meets user needs. As such, manufacturers must develop a full understanding of the product's users, use environments, and any specific characteristics that will affect how users interact with the product. The tasks we will perform during the research step are conduct research. During this step, we will conduct research to learn about the product's users and use environments. Common user research methods include observations, individual or group interviews, and desktop research such as literature reviews or web searches. The first step in designing a product that people can interact with safely and effectively is to understand the product's users. This often involves conducting user research to fully understand user needs and preferences. Develop use specification. A use specification is comparable to describing the product's indication for use and is primarily a compilation of content produced during research activities. We should begin work on the use specification very early in the product development and then refine it based on any additional research about users, use environments, and the intended use in general. Determine user needs. During this step, we use the data and insights from our research to define user needs. User needs are actionable problem statements, and their purpose is to capture what we want to achieve with our design, but not how you will achieve it. That's a product requirement. User needs are often phrased as the user needs to be able to. The outputs of the research step are user profiles. We should develop a user profile for each of the product's user groups. Example, patients, nurses, based on our research results. User profiles typically include description of users' demographics, occupational skills, technical, cognitive and physical traits, and performance shaping factors that will affect how users interact with the product. Use environment. We should develop a description for each environment in which the product is used. Example, operating room intensive care unit based on our research results. Use environment descriptions typically detail the environment's lighting, noise level, sound, potential distractions, size, ancillary equipment, and personnel present. Use specification. The use specification should include the descriptions of the following: intended medical condition, intended use population, intended part of the body or type of tissue applied to or interacted with, intended user profiles, intended use environments, operating principle, how the product works, and the user roles in the process. After successful completion of research step, update description of intended device users, uses, use environment, and training details in HFE report. HFE process step 2 analysis. Analysis is part of the HFE process focused on analyzing user task and use related risk. The goal is to identify use errors and difficulties that could occur when a user interacts with the product. The output of this analysis informs design changes that will mitigate use related risk. Why is it required? The FDA and other regulators require manufacturers to complete a comprehensive analysis of use related risk. Regulators expect manufacturers to identify potential use errors, determine which use error can lead to serious harm, and then implement design based risk mitigations to prevent or reduce the likelihood of use errors. The tasks we will perform during the analyze step are: conduct task analysis. Task analysis is a technique used to break down a process into discrete steps. It's a useful technique because it helps us systematically identify use errors that could occur at each step in a process. We will include the task analysis information, such as steps and substeps, as the first few columns in our use related risk table. We may also choose to document our task analysis as a flowchart. Identify potential use errors. During this step, we will identify as many potential use errors as possible. To do this, we need to think about all the ways things can go wrong, all the ways users could make mistakes with the product. There are analytical, data driven, and research techniques for identifying use errors. A thorough analysis uses several techniques. Each use error we identify becomes a row in our use related risk analysis table. Identify known use problems. Identifying known use related problems with comparable devices is a technique for identifying use errors. This analysis is required by regulators to ensure that new products are not prone to the same serious adverse events and interaction issues that have occurred with marketed devices. Analyze use related risk. When a user commits a user error, it can lead to harm to the user or patient. During this step, we should work with a clinical expert to define the harm that could arise from each use error as well as the severity of the harm. A thorough use related risk analysis also identifies the hazard and hazardous situation. Use related risk is a combination of the severity of harm caused by the user and the likelihood a user will occur. As such, to have a complete picture of risk, you must also define the likelihood, also called probability, for each user. Identify critical task. After we draft our use related risk table, we can use it to identify critical tasks. Critical tasks are tasks that, if performed incorrectly or not performed, can lead to serious harm. As such, critical tasks are generally those tasks associated with serious or higher severity ratings. Revise analysis. Our analysis effort should be iterative. Accordingly, update our analysis as the product's design evolves and we identify new users and implement new risk mitigations. The output of the analyze step are summary on known use problems. This summary describes the method, scope, and results of the known problem analysis. It includes a table of the identified known problems and presents evidence, example, design mitigations that the design addresses each known problem. Use related risk table. This table presents all the use related risk associated with our device. Each row contains information about a specific user, including the related task, hazard, hazardous situation, harm, severity, likelihood, and mitigation. Critical task list. The critical task list is a portion of the use related risk table that includes only tasks that are critical based on their severity rating. Our subsequent HFE efforts will have a strong focus on critical tasks, including identifying mitigations during design and evaluating critical tasks during formative usability test, and finally the HF validation test. After successful completion of analysis step, update the following in HFE report: summary of known use problems, analysis of hazards and risk associated with use of the device, description and categorization of critical tasks. HFE process step 3: design. Design is part of the HFE process during which a product's user interface is conceptualized, specified, and implemented. This step includes the design of all aspects of the user interface, such as the product's hardware, software, labeling, and training. Why is it required? The FDA and other regulators expect manufacturers to apply HFE design principles during development to ensure the final product reflects best practices and can be used safely and effectively. After developing the initial design and use related risk analysis, manufacturer must consider further opportunities to modify the product's design to mitigate risks. The tasks we will perform during design step are: develop UI requirements. UI requirements that define how the product will meet each user need. They are like an ingredients list for the user interface. Previous work, including user research and use related risk analysis, or inputs to requirement writing. Strong UI requirements are rooted in science, example HFE design principles, and are easily testable, that is, can be verified via inspection, measurement, etc. Develop UI specification primarily to satisfy a requirement set forth in IEC 62366. We must develop a UI specification that includes the following elements, which are testable UI requirements, indication whether accompanying documentation is required, indication whether product specific training is required. Apply HFE principles to product design. In the course of developing the product, we should apply UI design principles described in numerous textbooks and guidance documents, such as ANSI AAMI HE75 2009. We can also rely on our own and our team's knowledge of design best practices. Implement design-based risk mitigations. As the use-related risk analysis and UI requirements evolve, we must consider further opportunities to modify the product's design as the primary means to mitigate risk. During this step, we will brainstorm how we can change the product to address concerning risk, select our preferred design solution, and implement the changes. Develop user documentation. Our product might include user documentation, example, instruction for use, quick reference guide, as well as on product labeling that describes and facilitates proper product use. We should iteratively design and evaluate the user documentation to ensure its clarity and effectiveness. Develop training program and material. Similar to user documentation, we might also provide training to users to teach them about the product and how to use it safely and effectively. During this step, we should consider whether to implement a training program, and if the answer is yes, then you will conceptualize the training program and design the training materials. The outputs of the design step are: UI specification presents the final list of UI requirements. It also indicates whether the final user interface includes a user documentation and or training. At the end of the product development process, all our analysis, design and evaluation efforts will converge and we will arrive at the final product whose design we consider to be frozen. After successful completion of design step, update the following in HFE report: description of intended device users, uses, use environments and training, description of device user interface, analysis of hazards and risk associated with device use. HFE process step 4: evaluate. During the evaluate step, manufacturer should test drive the product. The purpose of conducting these evaluations, typically called formative evaluations because they are performed while the design is still forming, is to identify opportunities to improve the design. Manufacturers are well served to conduct a few formative evaluations to ensure they arrive at a final product that is sufficiently safe, effective, and satisfying to use. Why is it required? The FDA and other regulators expect manufacturers to iteratively design and evaluate the product to uncover usability and use safety issues during development. Each evaluation identifies findings, example, use errors induced by design flaws that warrant further risk mitigation, that is, design changes. The tasks we will perform during evaluate step are: develop user interface evaluation plan. This plan outlines the process by which we will perform evaluations of the product's design. It's essentially a to-do list for the overall evaluate step, describing the number and types of formative evaluations we anticipate completing during the product's development. Conduct HF evaluation. As part of the above task, we might elect to conduct an HF evaluation of the product. This activity can also be called an expert review or design critique. During this step, one or more HFE experts analyze the product and identify the product strength and opportunities for improvement. This step will produce design recommendation, example, suggested mitigations to address any weaknesses which we can use as an input to the next iteration of the product's design. Conduct formative usability test. During this step, we will conduct one or more formative usability test of the product and its user documentation. Formative usability tests involve representative of the product's intended users, example, patients, nurses, who perform hands-on tasks with the product, including those associated with critical tasks. For each formative usability test, we will develop a protocol to guide the test, conduct the test sessions, analyze the data, and finally develop a report that describes the test findings. Example, test participant interactions with and subjective feedback on the product and the associated recommendation for changes. Conduct pre-HF validation test. A pre-HF validation test is the final formative usability test you conduct before proceeding to the HF validation test. It is an opportunity to conduct a dry run of the HF validation method as well as identify any final use related issues that must be addressed before finalizing the design and proceeding with the HF validation test. The outcomes of the evaluate step are user interface evaluation plan. The final plan lists each formative evaluation performed in the course of the product's development. HF evaluation report. The HF evaluation report describes the findings and recommendations from the HF evaluation. Formative usability test report. Each formative usability test report describes the findings and recommendations from the formative usability test. Pre-HF validation test report. The pre-HF validation report describes the finding and recommendation from the pre-HF validation usability test. After successful completion of evaluate step, update summary of preliminary analysis and evaluation section in HFE report. HFE process step 5, validate. In most cases, manufacturers must conduct an HF validation test, sometimes called a summative usability test, to determine if a representative sample of the product's users can interact with the product in a safe and effective manner, thereby validating the user interface design. Why is it required? The FDA and other regulators require an HF validation test to confirm safe and effective use. Specifically, they expect the test results to demonstrate whether the product is vulnerable to users related to critical tasks that could lead to serious harm or compromised medical care. Regulators have many nuanced expectations for the conduct of HF validation test, such as sample size, training approach, evaluation activity presentation, and interview question timing. Understanding these details is essential to conducting a successful HF validation test. That meets regulatory expectations. The tasks we will perform during validate step are scope HF validation test. The first step in conducting an HF validation test is to define an appropriate scope. This is important both to ensure the test will meet regulatory expectations but also for project planning and budgeting purposes. Key scope details that we must finalize include the test sample size based on the number of distinct user groups, whether the test participants will receive training prior to their test sessions, and the training and test session duration. Develop HF validation protocol. This protocol defines how we will validate that the product can be used safely and effectively by intended users. The protocol will describe the test participants, recruiting method, test materials, environment, test personnel, evaluation activities, data collection and analysis methods, and reporting approach. The protocol will also include a list of use scenarios and knowledge tasks, each of which will be linked to one or more critical tasks identified in the use related risk analysis. The protocol will also list the open-ended questions we will use to collect test participants' subjective impressions of the product's use safety as well as the root causes associated with any users, instances of moderate resistance, close calls, or difficulties that occur during the HF validation test. Conduct HF validation test. This step is pivotal. The HF validation test will determine if a representative sample of the product's user can interact with the product in a safe and effective manner, thereby validating the UI design. The HF validation test will involve identifying test locations, recruiting test participants, and conducting the test sessions according to the HF validation test protocol. Develop HF validation report. After completing all HF validation test sessions, the next step is to analyze the data and report the results. The formal test report should cite all users, instances of moderator assistance, close calls, and difficulties that occurred during the test. For all findings with the potential for serious harm and therefore related to a critical task, we should present participant reported root causes and provide a root cause analysis based on our HFE experience and professional judgment. We should present findings related to critical tasks in a tabular format, matching any of the recent guidance on HF validation data reporting. For all findings not related to critical task, you can describe the issues more briefly, that is, in a summary paragraph, along with the participant reported root causes. The outcomes of the validate step are HF validation protocol. The final protocol describes the HF validation test scope, evaluation activities, example, use scenarios, and knowledge tasks, and the interview questions intended to collect test participants' subjective feedback and the root causes associated with the test findings. HF validation report. The final HF validation report should summarize the test method and then describe any critical task failures and related use difficulties that occurred during test sessions as well as the associated root cause analysis. After successful completion of validate step, update the following in HFE report. Analysis of hazards and risk associated with device use, description and categorization of critical tasks, details of HF validation testing. HFE process step 6 submit. During the submit step, manufacturer must perform their final HFE analysis, residual risk analysis, to confirm they have reduced use related risk to an acceptable level and that the product design is final. Manufacturers must document their HFE efforts in a consolidated summary report titled as HFE report. The report tells a compelling and consumable story of the manufacturer's application of HFE throughout the product's development and is included in the regulatory submission package sent to the regulatory bodies for review. Why is it required? Manufacturers demonstrate in the HFE report and usability engineering file that they arrived at a safe, effective, and usable product by applying HFE throughout the product's development. Regulators review these documents to understand the product and its risk, and then regulators determine whether they agree that the product's use related risk has been reduced to an acceptable level. That is, whether the product can be used safely and effectively. The task we will perform during submit step are perform residual risk analysis. During this step, we should engage a multidisciplinary team to review the HF validation test findings and perform residual risk analysis. Residual risk analysis involves considering the test findings and root causes and then determining if the level of residual risk is acceptable or if the further risk mitigations are needed to reduce risk to an acceptable level. The results of your analysis should be documented as the written residual risk commentary, which you will include in the HFE report. Finalize HFE report. Hopefully, we have been adding and refining our HFE report as we proceeded through the HFE process. At this point, it's time to add the last few sections of the HFE report and complete our final review. Specifically, we should add the residual risk analysis commentaries, update the user interface description to reflect any final design changes, update analysis of hazards and risks associated with use of the device to reflect any final changes to the use related risk analysis, write overall conclusion stating that the product can be used safely and effectively, prepare usability engineering file to document compliance with IEC 62366. As another final step, we also need to prepare documents for our usability engineering file to comply with IEC 62366. Notably, most of the content developed per previous steps of this project plan and in the course of developing the HFE report for FDA or EU MDR can be leveraged to populate the usability engineering file. The outcomes of the summit step are finalize usability engineering file. To comply with IEC 62366, the final usability engineering file must contain the contents: use specification, user interface characteristics related to safety and potential users, known or foreseeable hazards and hazardous situation, hazard related use scenarios, hazard related use scenarios for summative evaluation, user interface specification, user interface evaluation plan, formative evaluation reports, summative evaluation test protocol and report. Final HFE report. We are finally ready to submit our final HFE report. A strong HFE report has the following characteristics. Describe how HFE was applied throughout the development. Emphasizes the centrality of use-related risk analysis. Includes show and tell of how the user interface evolved. Documents work and outputs clearly and concisely. The end result of the HFE process is a great product, a product that's safe and effective, and one that can be used with a high degree of satisfaction. Another end result is the final HFE documentation and for submissions to the US FDA or EU MDR. This includes the HFE report. The HFE report is a show and tell exercise where the manufacturer explains how they went about applying HFE and particularly how they went about use related risk analysis to end up with a product that they are claiming to be safe and effective. Technically, the end product of the HFE effort is the HFE report or other summary documentation that aligns with local regulators' expectations. But what we are really looking for from all of this is a product that will perform brilliantly in the field for years to come without leading people to make mistakes that could be harmful. Following are the areas where we can help you: consultation on anything related to human factors, develop use specification, perform task analysis, implementation of usability engineering file, usability testing formative, usability validation summative, implementation of HFE report. This is all for today. I hope this webinar gave you greater insights into topic of human factors engineering. I can already see some questions in the chat. We will respond to them via email. For any further queries, you can contact us. Contact details are on the screen. We would be happy to help you for your human factors engineering needs. Please note, a recorded version of this webinar will be available on our website in a week from now. We will also send you an email with the link on your registered email ID to access this webinar. I would like to thank you for your time. Have a great day ahead.